Storytime about the ghost that follows me. When I was in my teens, my cousin and best friend made a Ouija board. I was skeptical whether it worked or not, but agreed to try it out with her. We get everything set up and my cousin starts asking the board questions. It starts answering and saying weird things that my cousin didn't even know about my life. Some of my deepest and darkest secrets were coming out of that thing. I started to panic and I told my cousin that I wanted to stop. We said our goodbyes and closed it up. I thought that was the end of it, but that night, we started hearing footsteps in her room. This was something that neither of us had experienced in that room ever. When I went home, the footsteps followed me and continued to happen in my childhood home. When I told my parents, my dad chalked it up to the floor settling after we laid new flooring in the previous years. Then we moved into a new home that had been converted from a garage to a business to a home by my family. I mention this because 1, no one had clearly ever lived there, and 2, the floors under the carpet and laminate were cement. However, the laminate would still creak as if a full-grown adult was walking on it. Shortly after, I moved into my ex's apartment and same thing. The footsteps again, but this time, shadows started appearing. It had gotten so bad that my best friend and roommate, who's a major skeptic, didn't want to be there alone. I didn't think it could get any worse, but it did. Part 2 of the ghost that follows me. I eventually moved out of the apartment. I moved in with my mother and sister in a different city. Her duplex went from no paranormal activity to an insane amount in just a few days. They would feel hot breaths on their face at night when they slept. My aunt started hearing giggling in a different room when she was alone, and I even heard someone say in an eerily tone, "Mommy," at 3 in the morning once. However, the craziest part is that the duplex mysteriously caught fire. When the fire department came and did their investigation, they had no explanation as to how the fire started or what caused it. After that, we moved into a new modular home who only had one previous owner. The footsteps started again. I found a pretty doll at an antique store, and eventually the doll started to move around on its own. There were times I caught it wave at me or move its head. It got to the point that I had to hide it away because it moved so much and it scared me so badly. I recently moved into an apartment in my hometown and the footsteps are here now. Things keep getting moved around too. I'm seeing the shadows again and it feels like I'll never be free of this thing. I don't know what to do, but I'm scared and terrified it'll always follow me. Storytime about how my boyfriend gave me sleeping pills before his boys' night out. I had been dating my boyfriend for a year and we always had a pretty trusting relationship. One weekend, he was going to have a boys' night out with his friends and I was going to stay home. However, earlier in the day, we had gone into an argument about how he never checks his phone while he's out or replies to my texts to check in. He said he shouldn't have to check in with me while he's out and I disagreed because I just want to make sure that he's okay. Fast forward to later that night when he's getting ready, I told him that even though we're fighting, I still expect him to keep in touch with me. He agrees this time without putting up a fight and asks me if I want to have a drink with him before he goes. He makes us some cocktails and we drink them together while we wait for his friends to come pick him up. When his friends get there, he kisses me goodbye and leaves. Not even half an hour later, I'm knocked out cold. I remember waking up once just for a second to use the bathroom, but then knocking out again. In the morning when I woke up, he was asleep next to me and I was really confused as to why I slept so much when I wasn't even tired. When my boyfriend woke up, he mentioned how nice it was that I hadn't messaged him and how I must have slept through the night after those cocktails. This raised some red flags and I quickly questioned him about what was in the cocktails. At first, he called me crazy and told me that he didn't do anything to them. However, after about 20 minutes of accusing him, he finally confessed. Part 2. My boyfriend gave me sleeping pills before his boys' night out. After I accused my boyfriend of messing with the cocktails, he admitted to putting a couple Benadryl in my drink. This, mixed with the alcohol, is what made me extremely sleepy and caused me to knock out for the whole night. I was furious when he said it. He clearly didn't see a problem with it and even made a joke about how he should do it more often when he doesn't want me pestering him. I freaked out at him and told him that what he did was not only wrong, but could also be a crime. I think this scared him a bit because he quickly started apologizing and promising to never do it again. Obviously, I'm not stupid and I wasn't going to stay with someone who would do that to me. I quickly called my family who came rushing over. I packed my things and my brothers kept my now ex in the other room, threatening him not to come around me. I got all my things together with my mom and my sister and left him that very day. He wouldn't stop blowing up my phone with apologies and sending sorry gifts to my work. I had to block his number and threaten him with a restraining order if he ever tried to talk to me again. I was horrified that someone would go to those lengths and I couldn't trust him after this. He even tried to get his family to text me to get back together with him, but when I told them why we broke up, they were shocked too. They apologized profusely on his behalf and told me to stay safe. Storytime about the best thing I saw while working in a restaurant. We've got a veteran who comes in on the regular named Hank. Hank lost his leg and hand in Iraq. When seeing this, people will often pick up his tab when he's in here, but he never feels like it's deserved, so he tries to lay low. He wears long pants to cover his prosthetic leg and doesn't wear anything to show off his veteran status. He doesn't like attention and it's clear he doesn't feel special treatment is deserved. So, obviously, we shut down because of COVID. We reopened when our state did, but after a week of indoor dining, the owner decided to go back to delivery and takeout for everyone's safety. Thankfully, business is still booming. I don't know the specifics of Hank's situation, but I think he lost his job sometime during the shutdown. Before COVID, we'd see him at least once a month, but this was the first time we'd seen him since we reopened. To make matters worse, he would easily put away 6 tacos or a whole chicken plus sides and plenty of beer when he come in, but this time he just ordered a small burrito and a water. He didn't mention the different order though, just said how excited he was to come through again and looking forward to it all week. We put in his order while I went to go get him paid up. However, his card declined. I started to tell him, but he could see it on the screen and went, shit. Shame and panic washed over his face as I tried running it again and again when he gave me another card that declined. Meanwhile, it was the height of lunch rush and the line was getting longer, so people were peering to see what was taking so long. After running Hank's cards a few times, all of his cards declined. He started saying, hey, you know what? Did you actually make the thing yet? But then the bag came out with his name unmistakably on it. He started digging around his pockets for cash and came up with $5.25. The meal was $7. I told him, don't worry about it, you'll get us next time. Knowing how embarrassed he got when people tried to cover him for a good reason, being a veteran, and not wanting to pile on by being forward that I was covering him for a not so great reason, hard times. However, he wasn't entertaining the idea of taking food without paying it in full. Finally, without making eye contact with us, he said, no, it's okay, I'm just gonna go to my place and get some more cash. However, I knew that look on his face and the tone in his voice. There was no more to go get. It's a look and tone I've used myself and seen from others more times than I wish I had. I wanted to insist he take the food, but I wasn't sure which was worse. To force food on him and risk damaging his dignity, or to let him say Facebook but go without the lunch he's been looking so forward to. Before I could decide, the girl behind him, who had been texting for most of our transaction, had just begun to tune in and caught the last bit. She asked, "Hey, what's the difference on what he owes?" I said, $2. She went in her purse and handed it right to me. Hank started to try and hand it back to her, telling her it wasn't necessary, but she cut him off. She cut him off by saying, No, it's $2. We've all been there. Enjoy your lunch." As he finally gave in and went to put her money on the counter, she noticed his prosthetic hand. She did a double take and said, "Actually, no, you know what? Let me get the whole thing. Give him his money back." Then went in her purse and got the rest. He tried to stop her from doing it, but she replied, "Listen, I hope I'm not being presumptuous, but you're a veteran, right?" He nodded. "Yeah, that's what I thought. I served 2 hours in Afghanistan. There's a guy walking around on false legs out there who's the reason I'm walking around at all. So please, allow me to do this and don't think twice about it. I tell you to just get anything you want off the menu if times weren't so tight for me right now too." At this point, an older guy with a bow tie came up and announced, "I couldn't help but overhear. Put both their tabs on me, get them anything they want, and then get them some more. Thank you both for your service." Hank was getting pretty emotional at this point, but even still, they both started to vigorously protest to the man that he didn't need to do that because it was their job and they both signed up for it. Bowtie guy wouldn't hear it. He must have had his own story because he got red in the face and blinked back tears but stayed silent. He left his credit card with me and went back to his spot in line. That's when another guy stepped up to the register. Part 2 of the best thing I saw while working in a restaurant. This guy handed me his card as well and said, "Yeah, I'm gonna split that tab, so really guys, go wild, you're American heroes." They both empathetically told him no, they're not heroes, but this guy cut him off saying, "Oh please, I get overwhelmed playing Call of Duty. You're heroes and I'm glad to thank you for it." So they started ordering and the girl knew just what she wanted. Hank asked how much our steak and rice platter special would cost. Older bowtie dude called him not to tell him the prices and get him whatever he wants. He came up and said, "Son, no one can put a price on your sacrifice." Call of Duty guy splitting the tab chimed in, "The meat that we're giving you is a lot less valuable than the meat you gave up for us." His friend elbowed him to shut up, horrified, but he got a belly laugh out of Hank. Throughout this, no one noticed not only had Hank lost his hand but also his leg. His pants covered and he's got too much honor to bring it up. By now, the kitchen got a whiff of what was happening and loaded them up real good. This lady was so moved that she paid for Old Man Bowtie and Call of Duty's meals. It was a domino effect. The owner was so disturbed that 2 veterans had struggled to pay for their meals. He instituted a military gets the special free day of the week even though we've been hemorrhaging money since the pandemic closures and keeping the doors open on a week-to-week basis. Hank told all of his veteran friends and they've been coming in with their families. It's been great for business. This is why you should be careful who you befriend. When I was in junior high, I was a friendly and curious person. 1 month into the fall semester, we got a new transfer student. He was seated behind me and his name was Joe. I introduced myself to him trying to ease attention. I showed him what we learned so far and helped him to look over his class schedule. We had 2 classes and lunch together. Naturally, we got to know each other and became friends. He was a quiet kid but talked a lot around me, so I assumed he was just comfortable with me. I made it clear to him that we were just friends and he agreed, so I brought him around my friends and we all started to hang out. Fast forward to spring break, I told Joe that I was going out of town with my family. He seemed disappointed we couldn't spend spring break together but understood. However, while on spring break, I ran into Joe at a restaurant. I didn't tell him where I was going, so I thought to myself, wow, what a coincidence. He said he was visiting family in the same town and I believed him. Then in senior year, Joe and I were hanging out at least 3 times a week. I noticed it was too much and I wanted to make time for my other friends as well. That's when things started to change. I ran into Joe, or should I say saw him in the corner of my eye when I spent time with someone else over myself. He started to become obsessive and clingy. The first few times I didn't think much of it. However, it all became clear when I questioned him and he said that he accidentally followed me. Part 2, why you should be careful who you befriend. Once I questioned Joe, he confessed saying that it was because he wanted to make sure I was safe. I felt betrayed and creeped out. He apologized and asked for forgiveness. I told him I didn't want to be friends with him anymore. That's when he got angry and left. The next 2 to 3 days, he didn't come to school. My friends told me that he harassed him for snitching on him. When he came back to school, we pretended like we didn't know each other. On my walk home that day, I heard Joe calling my name in a low and unfamiliar tone, but he was nowhere to be seen. I don't know why, but my gut told me to run as fast as I could. I listened to it and sprinted all the way home. I made sure every door and window was locked. I was convinced that I was being paranoid at this point. Then my phone screen lit up. I looked to see many missed calls from Joe. Then I heard my name being called again. I looked up to see Joe in the front of my house, banging on the door. Everything went completely silent after 5 minutes, which felt like an eternity. The last words I heard from him was, "You'll always be my best friend." This issue was brought up to the school and Joe never showed up again. 4 years have passed since then, and just a few days ago, I got a couple friend requests on my social media accounts. It was him. I blocked him and changed all my social media names to something else. I don't live in that same town anymore, or even the same country. However, I can't help but to feel like the scared 18-year-old me again. I'm not the friendly person I once was, and I've become cautious around other people. I had a falling out with my family which led me to be homeless. I ended up living in my Subaru Forester with my fiance who was living with me at my parents' house at the time. We made a bed out of camping pads and sleeping bags along with a ton of blankets. We stored our food and drinks under the rear seats which kept it from freezing. This all happened in the winter months of Pennsylvania. Most nights the weather was around 10 to 20 degrees in Fahrenheit. Camping in your car isn't technically legal here, so we had to hide it. I found a clearing in a remote area of the state forest that wasn't used in the winter. There was no winter maintenance, so we would follow our tire tracks the exact same way every night. This let us know we were alone and nobody had been there. Living in your car in the dead of winter is unnerving but also peaceful at the same time. One night we woke up to see footprints in the snow circling our car, but they led into the woods and disappeared after that. On colder nights, we'd bundle together and use the remote starter to run the car and warm us up. There was a porta potty in walking distance, and the nearest gas station for food was 20 minutes away, sometimes longer if there was more than a few inches of snow on the trail. This went on for most of the winter into the spring until I was in an accident. The roads leading to our spot were all 2-lane roads with no passing zones. My fiance was following me in her car since the snow was gone and she could make it down the trail now. Someone passed both of us using the oncoming lane while doing double the speed limit. The road was cold and wet, so they lost control. The accident caused a chain reaction of my fiance's car sliding into mine when I had to slow down to avoid the accident ahead of me. The police ended up accusing us of racing with the driver, who passed away in the hospital a few days later. Multiple charges were brought up against us and we couldn't afford to lose our driver's licenses over it since we both worked in the automotive industry and it was a requirement. Homeless and living in our cars with little money, we were faced with the choice of losing our licenses for something that we didn't do or hiring a lawyer to prove our innocence. Even though we couldn't afford it, we chose the latter and had to pay $1,000 each. The deadline for payment was short and we ended up selling almost all of our possessions that we had left in order to pay it in time. They threatened to drop our case multiple times over it, which only added to the stress. My fiance's car barely survived after being in the body shop for almost 3 months. My car, which doubled as our home, was totaled. I used the insurance check to finance the car from the dealer that I worked at. I fell behind on the payments because of the lawyer fees and the lack of work in the shop. There wasn't even enough work for everyone to make 20 hours at one point. I left the shop and worked for multiple food and grocery delivery companies to support myself. My car was repossessed and we ended up sharing my fiance's car. Delivering food for multiple companies was barely enough to pay the bills. Food became a once-a-day luxury most of the time. Sometimes customers wouldn't put the right zip code for their address or take too long to buzz me into their apartment, so I ended up marking the food as delivered and keeping it. This happened once with a lady who put the wrong town, and instead of driving over to the next town, I kept it. They got multiple pizzas and sandwiches, which ended up lasting us 3 days. I'm not proud of it, but my hunger and frustration with my living conditions got the best of me. It was the only time that I ever stole anything in my life. I'm working in a motorsports shop now and doing well with it. I still have debts to pay off, but I'm moving into a trailer with my fiance this fall. This will be our first home together that's truly ours and we're excited for it. I still deliver food, but it always makes its way to the customer now.